Hello, I am in the classroom today. I was working and I decided I wanted to give these new lovely screens a go. So this is how we're going to do notes today. So we're talking about domain and range, which is very similar to what we were just working on with functions. Functions, we were just looking at those x values, also known as the inputs, the domain, the independent variable. Today we're going to focus on that word domain. Those are all the x values that I have for my function, for my relationship. And then the independent variable as well. We've heard that, we've seen that before with science class, we've heard it in other math classes that we've had before. So again, x values, that's what we did with functions all last class. And today we're going to add to it, those are called our domain for our relationship. And then our y values, we know that those are also called the outputs. What we're adding in today is it's going to be called the range, and the dependent variable. Again, you've seen that in science class. Something that kind of helps me remember what's the difference, which one's the domain, which one's the range, is if I look at the word domain, none of those letters go down below. Like, you know how sometimes if I write the letter like J and G and P, those letters go down below all the other letters? Domain and X, those all stay on one line. But what helps me remember is the P in output, that goes below the line, just like a Y goes below. Just something that helps me remember. So again, like we said, our domain is going to be all of our X values. So I'm going to read the numbers on the X axis, that horizontal axis. The Y values for my range. The range is my Y values. That's the vertical axis like we talked about last class. So everything on here, everything on there is going to be my Y values, my range. That horizontal one, that is my X values. That is my domain. So go ahead and write domain and range on there. Isn't this exciting? I love this. So the domain is the set of all possible X values like we just talked about. My domain is all of my X numbers that I have in my function, in my relationship. So if I'm looking at the domain with ordered pairs, I'm looking at all of my X values. Remember, if I write coordinates, what comes first? The X comes first and then the Y. Remember the X, that is my range. Oh, Andrea, that's backwards. The X is my domain. The Y is my range. The X is my domain. The Y is my range. So if I'm looking at this first set of ordered pairs, if I want to find the domain, I'm only looking at my X's, the first number in my coordinates. So here, my domain numbers would be 0, 1, 2, and 3. So for my domain, I would write 0, 1, 2, and 3. If we really want to be fancy math people, we're going to add in a bracket. This thing here on the edge is called a bracket. It's kind of like a parenthesis with a point in the middle. It looks like that. It's a little ugly. This one's going to be better. I always do the left ones better than the right ones. I don't know why. So my domain here would be 0, 1, 2, and 3. If a number repeats for my domain, I only have to list it one time because I only care about the X values. I don't care how many there are. If something repeats, I only have to put it one time. And then I want to look at the same thing again down here for my second example. Try that one on your own. Pause the video. What are all of the X values in that list? All right, so I'm going to draw my bracket. That's a better one. I'm only looking at the x's, the first numbers in my coordinates. So my first x is -1. Then I have 0. Then I have +1. And then I have +2. When you write out your domains and the ranges for later, you usually write them in numerical order. So if I think about a number line, I would want to write them in that order. So like if I were to count, it goes 0, 1, 2, 3. If I look at a number line, it goes -1, 0, 1, 2. It's not wrong if you put it in a different order. Like if I made this, if I did like 3, 1, 0, 2, that's not wrong, but that's not how it would look on a test. That's not what it looked like in a textbook. We want to write it in numerical order. Now we're going to look at domain on a table. Domain on a table. I'm still looking at all the possible x values, my inputs. I'm looking still at my inputs, my x values. So all I want to do is list my x values. On my table, I know my x's go on top, y's go below. If they're vertical, remember the x is on the left, the y is on the right. If they go horizontal, x is on the top, y is on the bottom. So I just need to list my x values using those brackets from last time. So here I've got my bracket, my x numbers, that's what I'm looking at. I don't care about the y's. I would want to write -1, 0, 1, and 2. Those are all my x values. Pause the video, try the next one on your own. What are the x values for that table? Again, I want my bracket. I don't care about my y's. I don't care about my y's. I only want my x's. I see I have 0, 4, 8, 12. That's it. I just have to write down my x values. The hardest thing is remembering that your domain is your x. Your domain is your x. That's the hardest thing to remember. Now on a graph. Now on a graph. Like we talked about earlier. Again, I'm looking at my inputs. I'm looking at my x values. I need to list all my x values. We know that. But now we've got to read the graph. So on my graph, where do I look for the x numbers? Is that the horizontal axis or the vertical axis? My x is my horizontal axis. So I have to look there to see what are the numbers that go here. So there's a few different strategies that you can look at. One thing that you can do is draw lines to help you. So if I need to see what the x numbers are that match these points, I would go from my point up to the line, and I would see the x for that would be -1. So my first x would be -1. No, I don't like that. Oh, that's worse. -1, there we go. My next one, the x would be 0, because it's right on that y-axis, or that coordinate, y-axis, there we go. My next one would be a +1. My next one would be a +2. Then I'd have a +3. And then I would have a +4. And then again, I want my brackets around it. Don't worry if your brackets aren't pretty. Mine are never pretty. That's one way to look at it. On this next set, maybe it would help you turn those points into a table. So let's try that. Let's try turning these points into a table. So here, I'm going to make my X and Y table go this way, just so I know I have enough room. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 dots. So I'm going to make 4 spaces. So for this point, I see my X is negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And my Y is positive 1, 2, 3, 4. For this dot here, my X is negative 1, 2. My Y is positive 2. This point, my X is 1. My Y doesn't go anywhere, so it's 0. And this last one, my X is positive 4. My Y is negative 2. Again, what values do I look at? I look at my X's. I do not care about my Y's. I do not care about my Y's. So I would want to list my X values. So we would have negative 5, negative 2, 1, and 4. If you're struggling reading points on a graph, I'm going to put something on Schoology to help you guys out. Remember, we read graphs, X is left and right, Y is up and down. Lastly, domain on mapping diagrams. Like we've been saying, we know it's the inputs. We know those are the X values, so we have to list all of our X values. I keep putting this over and over and over again because that's the biggest thing that people are going to forget. They're going to mix up, is it the X or is it the Y? So that's why I keep writing it over and over again. Domain is the X, domain is the X, domain is the X. On our mapping diagrams, is the X the input or the output? Which side is it? The X is my input. Don't care about those guys. So if I want to come in and I want to write my X values, I just write the numbers on my input side. So I would write, I have 0, 1, 2, and 3. Boom. I wrote down the numbers from my input. Try this next one on your own. Pause the video, try that last one on your own while I get a sip of my sweet tea. Remember, this is the X on the left, the Y is on the right, but I do not care about my Y. I only care about my X's. So I'm going to write, I have negative 8, negative 1, 0, and 15 for my map, or for my domain for the mapping diagram. Again, domain's the X, domain's the X, domain's the X. Moving on to the range. The range. The range is the opposite of the domain. I'm looking at all of my outputs or all of my Y values. Like I told you guys before, if I write the letter Y, it goes below that line. Range, the G goes below that line. That helps me remember that the Y and the range go together. So if that helps you too, think about that so you can know the difference. You remember the difference between the two. Again, ordered pairs. I'm looking at all of the outputs, all of the Y values here. My coordinates, what comes first, the X or the Y? First is the X, then it's the Y. I only care about my Y now. Before we were only looking at the X. With functions, it was just the X. With domain, it was just the X. But now with my range, I only care about the Y. So that's going to be the second letter, the second number in my coordinates, okay? So here, 0, that's an x. I need 3, 5, 7, and 9. Those are the second numbers in each coordinate, so those are going to be my y's. So again, using my bracket or my brace, I only write the y's. So I would have 3, 5, 7, and 9. Again, I only care about the y. This is the range now. This is the range. Before it was domain. Let's do it again down here. I'm only looking at the y. That's the second number in my coordinates. So it's going to be, oh, Andrea, girl. So it's going to be -8, -5, -2, and 1. The second number, that's my y. I'm doing the range, so I only care about my y's. So I've got -8, -5, -2, and 1. If you guys have questions, make sure you send us messages, send us emails, because we got a test on it this week. Next, we have range on a table. We just did domain. Domain's the x. Range on a table, then we're looking at the y values, the outputs, all the outputs that we see. That doesn't fit on that line so well. But it says output. It says output. So again, we're just making a list of all of our y values. What numbers will we get for our answer? I don't care about my x. Don't care about my x values. I only want the y's. This is where we get a little different from what we've seen before. Before we were talking about how we only, or let me rephrase. So before, when we've been looking at the x's are always listed in a table in order, in that numerical order like you'd see on a number line. But it doesn't always match up with the y's. So here we see our y's are 6, 4, 2, and 0. But I need to put it in order. I need to put it in order from smallest to biggest, least to greatest. So out of those y's, what is the smallest number? 0. So I got 0 for my range. What's the next biggest number? 2. And then 4. And then last we've got 6. If you wrote them 6, 4, 2, 0, that's not wrong. It's not wrong, but it's just not the best answer. We always want to put it in order, like good mathematicians, from least to greatest. Try number 4 on your own. Try number 4 on your own. Pause the video. See if you can do that one on your own. If I come in, don't care about my x, I'm on the range. They're already in order for me, so that's nice. So I just got -3, -2, -1, and 0. Whoop, whoop. Range on a table, range on a table, range on a table. Now for range on a graph. Again, before we were looking at domain and that was the x. Now we're looking at the y's, the outputs. Now we're looking at the outputs, we're looking at the y's. We need to list all the y values. Like we said last time, we can either just read it from the graph or you can put it into a table. A lot of kids tell me that tables help them. So if I'm looking at the y, is that the horizontal or the vertical line? Y is my vertical line, yes. So I need to read all the numbers that go with those dots on that line. So again, I'm going to do it both ways that we've seen. Here, my smallest y, that's negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I've got negative 5. This one is negative 3, negative 1, positive 1, positive 3, positive 5. Lots of numbers on that one. Lots of numbers on that one. Or like we said, make a table. If it helps to make a table to write down the coordinates for you, make a table. Maybe you only need to write down the coordinates. Maybe that's enough to help you. If I were to write down the coordinates, I would come down to like this point. I would see that here, this coordinate is 4, negative 2. I know that the y I need there would be negative 2. Or you just look at the coordinate and then, like I said, come fill it in. So my x would be 4, my y would be negative 2. I'm writing my table in the order that they're going to be in for me. So I'm writing them from least to greatest, even though usually we would write it this way in order. My next set of coordinates would be positive 1, 0. My next coordinate over here would be negative 2, positive 2. And then my last coordinate over here would be negative 5, positive 4. Again, which numbers do I care about for my range? I care about my y's. I don't need to see those x's anymore. I just need to write down my y's. So my answer for this one would be negative 2, 0, 2, and 4. Boom, mic drop. That's range on a graph. And then the last one are range on mapping diagrams. See if you can fill out that top part for me. We've been doing that this whole time. Range is the set of all possible outputs. All those y values, what we need to do is list the y's. We don't care about the x's, we're just listing the y's for range. Which one of those is which? We should know this by now. We saw it with functions, now we're seeing it with domain and range. My input is my x, my output is my y. I don't care about my inputs, I don't care about my x's. I just need to list my y values. So here I see for my y's, I have negative 2, 1, 2, and 4. Try this last one on your own. Pause the video, do the last one on your own. This is probably the shortest one that we've had all day. Again, I don't care about my x. I want to write down my y's. So if I write down my y's, I have 7, I have 9, and that's it. That's a bracket. That looks like a 3. Let me redo that. There we go. So that is domain and range on the graph or on a mapping diagram. So if you continue on through this slideshow, there's more practice with domain and range. I give you guys examples for everything, just like we did together in class for domain and for range. And then when you get to the end, once you've got them all completed, there's a separate video for you to go through and watch of me solving these problems to make sure that you are on the right track. good luck with this. I hope you guys like seeing it on here. It's so fun, this board. Oh my goodness, I can't wait till we're back in person so we can play. Well, not play, learn with it. There we go. Have a good one.